Guten Tag, or good afternoon, everybody. Pleasure being here in Prague yet again for another edition of this wonderful conference series. Also great to see your turnout today here for our traditional DACH panel, and I think we're all fully motivated to provide full value to you. I have three wonderful colleagues with me, and together we're going to cover the DACH region, in other words, Germany, Austria, Switzerland, maybe even a few words on Liechtenstein, which is German-speaking as well. So let me just briefly introduce our panelists. Of course, let me start with our eternal friend of Prague and other editions of Soltan's conference, Dr. Jörg Hoffmann. I trust he's known to most of you. He's certainly one of the leading gaming lawyers globally. He's partner with Melkers Law in Germany, a leading law firm in the field, and has been presenting many times in these conference series. So thank you and welcome. Then we have, of course, I should mention first, on my left, Anna-Maria Furtschäcker. She will be speaking to us today mainly about Austria. Anna-Maria has loads of experience in the gambling industry with major gambling law firms. Nowadays works as an advisor, independent advisor, consultant, still in the field. And then finally, of course, coming to Christian, Dr. Christian Rapani, who founded his own law firm, also heavily specialized in the field of games, gaming, including esports, very much so. And we will be very pleased to hear your contribution on Austria as well today. So if you allow me to maybe start with Austria. If I understand correctly, Christian, we have breaking news. Of course, we try to be very topical here, not mention every year the same things that are going on or have been going on for the last 10 years, but to provide you topicality. And there is a very recent case coming from the Austrian Supreme Court, right?
Yes, many of you, I'm sure all of you are aware that there is a problem with player claims in Austria, and normally it's me in conferences when talking to my clients being the guy with the bad news. This time I'm really proud and happy. I have good news. Not for games of chance, but for betting. As you may know, in Austria, betting is not part of the games of chance monopoly, but it is regulated in 9 separate state betting laws. 5 of the Austrian states regulate online betting explicitly. 4 states are tacit in their gaming or betting laws. And now we had a situation where a Malta-based and licensed operator offered betting products to Austria, and a player from Styria, one of the states that does not regulate online betting explicitly, tried to claim back losses he incurred due to this betting offering. As I said before, just to make sure everyone's on the same page, player claims normally for games of chance work in a way that the contract between the operator and the player is illegal, therefore nil and void, and based on unlawful enrichment, players get back their net loss. And these processes are heavily driven and financed by process cost financiers, and we had the strong impression that they tried to duplicate their business by also claiming back betting losses. And now, the good news, the Supreme Court, even better, citing our firm in a statement we made years ago, confirmed that it is perfectly legal to offer sports bets and betting in general to Austria with a foreign license over the border. The most important thing is do not have any kind of physical presence in one of these states, because even the states that regulate online betting explicitly may become applicable in case you have physical presence in these states.
Can you confirm that logic of provisioning services from abroad, that this is okay? That would only apply to companies based in the EU EA, right?
The Supreme Court was not that clear in this regards, but I would have the strong feeling that it could help if you hold a license in another EU member state. They did not say it, but this is from experience. I think this will be favorable in any case.
Okay, and another thing to confirm, can you confirm that this is valid for all 9 Austrian Länder regions?
I can confirm as far as a lawyer can confirm something.
You can put limitations.
Yeah. No. Now we know for very sure for the states where the state betting law is tacit in regards of online betting offerings, but to be very honest, the argumentation there is even harder to justify these offerings. So we are even more convinced that also in the states explicitly regulating online, this is feasible and a legal option to do so.
Wonderful. If you permit, I'll switch to Germany for a moment, and we'll do a couple of shorter interventions instead of very long interventions on one country. Jörg, maybe you could give us a brief update on the landscape, how it looks with the licenses, because this finally actually got kicked off, right?
Yeah, sure, Simon. Thank you very much. Honestly, I'd prefer to report on maybe Greenland or Sahara, the moon maybe, because Germany is so confusing and so complicated. I tried to restructure that now. As many of you know, we started granting licenses as of 1st of January, licensing systems, application system proceedings as of January 2020, and then later, as of 1st of July, a license application started for a so-called virtual slot machine license. What is virtual slot machines? It's casino games limited to slots only. You're not allowed to call this online casino because that's something else, which is regulated by the 16 German states, and only for table games and live games, and not part of the publicly available license application systems for the private industry, only with some very few exceptions. So we have first licenses operating under the license. I think it's about 28 out of expected 70. This is not much, and even 70 is not much. We expected when the first message was circulated, a new interstate treaty will offer a licensing for this sort of the industry, for this sector of the industry. We expected 200 or 300 applications coming up and flooding the desks of the new regulator, but the conditions in Germany are pretty much restricted. For the slot machine industry, what threatens the industry is there is a minimum spin duration of 5 seconds, which no player really likes. There is a stake limit for every single game with an amount of €1. We have a deposit limit, which is the standard of €1,000 per player per game. You can apply for exemptions, probably up to 30,000 per player per game, but that's subject to another round of permissions granted by the regulator. Sports betting, it's between 30 and 35 licenses. We are still waiting for more licenses being granted, in particular virtual slot machines. Some applications are pending for 2 reasons. One is it takes time, and the capacity of our new regulator is still not sufficient. And the second one is you get your license if you submit a bank guarantee or a deposit, cash maybe, in the amount of minimum 5 million euros. And obviously, it's not easy for the gaming industry to get a bank, to find a bank that provides this bank guarantee. So there are certain delays, and if you haven't provided that license, you will not get it. So the regulator is now putting pressure on the industry to get this done. And I think it's a 2-digit amount, maybe 20 or more, waiting for the license.
If you're allowed to maybe wrap up this first round, Jörg, are you able to give some kind of prognosis in relation to the market? And all we now know also we have the new regulator in Halle. Maybe you can say a couple of words on that.
Yeah, when I started, everything sounds so very dark because of that restriction and because of this missing balance between black market operators who have many advantages, of course, and are more competitive. But there is also some positive aspects. As of 1st of January this year, a new super regulator took over. It's the GGL, stands for Gemeinsame Glücksspielbehörde der Länder, and that means Joint Gambling Supervisory Authority. It's located in the city of Halle. It's not the best area in Germany if you look at the economy. It's not easy to get there, but it's a brand new authority with people coming from various sectors. Only very few had some experience with gaming. That makes it difficult, that causes time delays in progressing matters, but they're very open-minded and approachable and very responsive. So the industry is building up a new level of dialogue, which in the old days, meaning 1 or 2 years ago, was almost impossible. And so even if the interstate treaty is full of restrictions, when there is leeway and the regulator understands we have to do better, we have to support this industry, they start open up dialogues and talks and meetings, and I can give an example later. That is something which will lead into an assessment, an evaluation of German regulation, and to changes of the regulation itself, not overnight, but maybe within the next 1 or 2 years.
Wonderful. I'll promise to revisit Germany with you in a second. But coming to Austria again, Anna Maria, one of the bigger exercises in the near future is going to be the redistribution or allocation of offline casino licenses in Austria. As you know, currently held by an Austrian company, or should I say Czech company, right? Yeah. Because the main beneficial owner is Saska. So Casinos Austria held by majority by Saska. What can you tell us about this process? It seems far away, but yet some important steps are being taken now.
Yeah, the interesting thing is that offline, in Austria, you have the option of 12 casino licenses, but actually all 12 casino licenses are held by Austrian lotteries, i.e. Casino Austrias. And one of the reasons is that the requisites are so specific that nearly no one can really comply with those requisites. The last time, we have the next one in 27, and the license period is for 15 years. And the last time, in 2012, 3 additional licenses were temporarily granted to private operators, only that they were then discussed at the Constitutional Court, and the Constitutional Court found that the tender process was not transparent. And so in the end, although also the European Court of Justice said you need more transparency and you need the possibility to apply for an Austrian casino license EU-wide, in the end, everything remained the same. Pretty much the same.
we have seen that on a couple of occasions, indeed. You mentioned a couple of peculiar requirements. I understand there is a requirement of quite a lot of cash that you need to put in the company. Can you comment on that?
Well, not only that, you also have to prove that you already operated an offline casino somewhere else. And so it's the combination of the requisites that make it very hard, not impossible, but very hard to comply with. Mm. And we speak about high amounts of money, over 100 million.
I believe it's 105 liberated million dollars, euros, of course. So that's quite a significant amount, probably to scare off a few competitors or potential competitors indeed. We have currently a government in place that is composed of the Conservatives plus the Greens. Do you see an interest that they would like to get things wrapped up already now? And maybe second question, what if the government changes? Can everything turn around again?
Well, that's very hard to predict. Theoretically, everything can be turned around. In fact, in spring 21, the finance ministry announced they would review the complete legislation, they would set up an independent authority, and that would have to be done now quickly for the next tender because the whole process starts next year. They would also want to introduce the regulation of loot boxes and so on and so forth. And the last time they were questioned about what is going on with this review, they said they cannot comment because the process is ongoing. And as we know from many European countries, such reviews last sometimes decades,
They can take time.
like in Germany. And so I doubt that anything will change anytime soon.
Okay, thank you for the insights. Christian, coming back to Austria and some interesting court cases, we can comment on FIFA, and so not referring to the Zurich-based company, but actually the game, the FIFA game, which has also been in the news and in court cases in the Netherlands, where a court of law first found that the FIFA game was a game of chance, and then on appeal it was held that it was not a game of chance. And I understand that such a case just took place in Austria at a regional court, right?
Exactly, this was the district court of Hermagor. If you want to call it a town, you can call it a town. It has 7,000 inhabitants. And this very spectacular and very recognized court case was about an amount of approximately 340 euros was the claim. But what was remarkable was that the plaintiff was Sony Entertainment. And also remarkable, the player won the case in first instance. What happened was a player tried to obviously make sure the court would rule in a way that the FIFA packs that are bought with FIFA points, that at the very beginning are bought with fiat cash, that these fiat packs are loot boxes and are to be qualified as a game of chance under the Austrian Gaming Act. With the consequence, back to the very beginning of my first intervention, qualifying it as a game of chance would make it possible to claim back losses like we are used to in Austria with slots and casino games and so on. The court came to the conclusion, as I already said, that these loot boxes are games of chance. In the Austrian Gaming Act, we have a set of prerequisites you need to fulfill, or a game needs to fulfill to be qualified as game of chance. First of all, the outcome of the game needs to be predominantly or in total defined by chance. The second thing is it needs to be offered by an entrepreneur. Then you need a stake. The stake here was represented by first fiat to use for the acquisition of FIFA points, and then these FIFA points are used to buy these FIFA packs, being these loot boxes. And this is where I think the argumentation of the court might be challenged, and the court decision, I'm pretty sure it will be challenged. It's not binding yet, but one of the weak spots I spotted is that you need winning somehow connected to the stake. And FIFA rules state that it is forbidden to trade the players you get when you buy these loot boxes outside of the FIFA game. But this is where the judge made this extra mile by finding out that 3% of FIFA players trade their players in a, let's call it, secondary market outside of the original PlayStation FIFA game, and this with the possibility to make a winning when reselling these players. So this is where they found the winning, and then the set was complete, check, and then in the next step, the logic I explained before regarding games of chances was applied and the player won.
This last point seems a bit challengeable, right? That is probably not set in stone. Do you see a chance that this could be overturned on appeal?
Yeah, I'm convinced that there will be an appeal. If I was the lawyer representing Sony, this would be the first thing I would target. And to put everything into perspective, there has also been another ruling that was not that discussed because it was not promoted so heavily by the process cost financiers, by another district court in Vienna, deciding in the opposite way. Also, this one is not binding yet, and it's highly likely that it will be challenged in this case by the player.
Thank you very much, Christian. Coming back to Germany, Jörg, we've spoken about quite a few aspects of the licensed market. We've also mentioned a rather positive development that it's possible to approach the regulator, and of course the regulator then is bound nevertheless by the regulatory framework that was drafted not by them. Maybe you can dive a bit deeper into the black market also, and some figures that you might have picked up in your practice and that you might have heard, and how you currently assess the black market.
There's a new department with the GGL, the new regulator, just focusing on black market operators, advertising for illegal games of chance. Illegal means not licensed in Germany. And they are publishing some figures that, well, over 100 criminal investigation has been started. More than 1,500 sites have been checked. So far, we have not seen any of these sites moving away from the market. The regulator told us 2 weeks ago with respect to sports betting that the channelization rate in Germany is 95%. We could call this a success, but then we ask, so how do you calculate this? Because we don't trust these analyses. Where will you get these figures from? And he told us, well, that's quite easy. We looked at the tax revenues in Germany for sports betting. This is public figures. And we knew how much the amount was coming from the licensed industry. And 5% came from operators not licensed in Germany. So the definition of channelization and the way of calculation is we're looking at all the taxes being paid, and then this is 100%. We deduct those who are licensed. The remaining is 5%, so 95% channelization rate. Not taken into consideration, which they confirmed, all those black market operators who target customers in Germany but pay no taxes, and this could be a huge amount of operators as well. But honestly, I mean, the black market is the biggest issue for Germany. I talked about some restrictions we have, these limits, and the black market has no limits at all. Black market operators are, well, practicing advertising. We've seen a few weeks ago that the new regulator imposed the first fine, a 5-digit amount, so more than 10,000 euro, on an operator who is licensed, one of those very few whitelisted operators, for advertising on an affiliate site, where the affiliate also allowed unlicensed operators to advertise, to do their marketing. And the regulator said it cannot be in the interest of German licensed operators that others, non-licensed operators, have a chance to use the same advertising and marketing channels. I think it's the opposite. It is in the interest of those operators to show their presence and to show their assets of being licensed everywhere, in particular where black market operators compete. But this is something where we have to deal with. And once we understand enforcement doesn't work, then we have to adjust the attractivity of the offerings. We got some interesting court cases. First is IP blocking is not allowed, not based on the current interstate treaty. 3 courts confirmed in a row that this cannot be applied, so the regulators suspended IP blocking. They went after Telecom and other providers, asked them to stop it, but it didn't work. We've seen another interesting court decision regarding the prohibition of advertising with influencers. It's not in the law, but the regulator tells you you're not allowed to use influencers for marketing purposes. The first court, I think it was in Hamburg, told us, no, that is beyond what is acceptable. As long as the operator can control how the influencer is going to advertise or to stream his content, is perfectly fine. So that's a second thing that really doesn't work. And finally, because it's interesting for those affiliates of you, there are some platforms like comparison platforms which offer rankings of casinos. And of course, this business model works if all the casinos, may they license or not, will be mentioned and part of an assessment. The regulators send out hearing letters, threatening interdiction letters and fines. So this is something which is advertising for the illegal market. But it depends on the structure of the site. But as I said before, the regulator is open-minded and said, well, let's talk about it. Probably we find some guidance. And now we're trying to figure out how you can structure such sites by continuing mentioning all the casinos, but probably not linking to all those casinos, or even if, then provide the information that is illegal, this one is legal, it's not protected, it is protected. There's something in motion, and I think this is the good way to go, and it takes some time, but the train has left the station.
Wonderful, thank you very much, Jörg. I will say then myself a few words about Switzerland, but before doing so, I will also permit myself to say a couple of words regarding Liechtenstein, and we have the pleasure of having also the regulator from Liechtenstein here among the audience. While Liechtenstein has been, let's say, sharing competences and delegating certain competences also through a customs union with Switzerland that is celebrating 100 years this year. This does not apply in the field of gambling. Liechtenstein has its own gambling regulation, and as you might have, if you are an aficionada or aficionado in following this conference series, you must be aware that the Liechtenstein market, casino market, has been growing significantly over the years, with many casinos, and having by now the highest casino density actually in Europe on the population. In a quite drastic move, a committee was built that collected signatures against casinos in Liechtenstein, and that referendum foresaw, or that initiative foresaw, that casinos would have needed to close within a couple of years, and the outcome was quite uncertain beforehand, but finally the result was very clear. It was a very clear no against the initiative, so Liechtenstein for the time being will continue to have a very high density of casinos, but there are some other regulatory amendments on their way. Then coming to Switzerland, what I find probably most relevant for you to know towards the international gaming community is the fact that the cool-down period that has been imposed on the international actors that formerly accepted players, online players, in the Swiss market, that cool-down period is coming to an end. Now, I will explain that in more detail. What the law foresees is that essentially, and that was a little trick that the legislator applied. The legislator realized that it was not illegal, strictly speaking, to be on the Swiss market because it was not regulated. But then they told themselves, well, then let's do it in a different way. If it's not strictly speaking illegal, then we will say whoever was on the market beforehand will not meet the good reputation criterion, will not be what you hear internationally, will not form a good actor, right? Will be considered a bad actor because of former market activities. And if you have done so, then you need to wait 5 years. So essentially from the moment from which you have withdrawn from the Swiss market, no longer accepting Swiss customers, a 5-year time period is running. And those who have withdrawn early on, maybe even before the new law entered into effect, which was on 1st of January 2019, these companies, be it actually also operators, not just B2Bs, but operators, they can now qualify again as cooperation partners. And we spoke about this actually over lunch. There is a certain irony about the Swiss regulation. The starting, let's say the the first impression is, okay, this is a very difficult market because it's protected. Only land-based casinos can offer legally online casino games. And we are permitted to call it casino games, actually. So slot and other games. And that's at federal level, not by the cantons. So only the land-based casinos can offer that as licensees. And it's true, that seems a more difficult regime than, of course, an open licensing system, as you see it in other countries. But then when you look closer, quite a few of these aspects that are becoming more and more difficult in Europe, only mentioning advertising, for instance, seem unaffected in Switzerland. There are no further advertisement restrictions in Switzerland, so in quite stark difference to quite a few European countries by now. Also some of these limitations you mentioned, Jörg, in the German market, they don't apply in Switzerland essentially. So there are no fixed amounts as such that would apply. But of course the licensees, they have to monitor the player game. And there is another issue which actually, and this is something regulators should really carefully consider, whether they are really protecting players or whether they're doing something else. In Switzerland, when an online casino sees there is some red flag going up, whatever compliance alert, they then regularly have to ask for financial documentation from the player. So they will ask the player for certain financial documentations within a few weeks. And if the player does not send in the documentation, the player gets blocked nationwide, as if that player was suffering from a gambling addiction disorder. And of course, this to some extent is questionable, because if you have a huge part of people who are actually blocked and do not, or very likely not, suffer from such a problem, but simply for whatever reason did not hand in their financial documentation, then this is probably a point to be reconsidered. Having said that, I want to revisit again a bit on Austria, Anna Maria, and also knowing that you have worked in the Portuguese market, very much so. You also speak fluently Portuguese, and we're heading the trade association, is that correct? For the
Correct, yes.
online industry. So we haven't really prepared that topic, but maybe you can spontaneously say a few things about what you see in Portugal, in the Portuguese, especially online gambling market, and then maybe contrasting it also with Austria, where it would appear there's quite a protectionist stance still taken, but not really for the benefit of the industry, right?
Well, when it comes to Portugal, we have to understand first, it's a full regulation already in place since 2016. They have regulated all products. They have regulated in a very consistent way, although they weren't forced to do so. From an EU perspective, this was one of the few countries in Europe that in fact regulated without the need to, because they simply understood it's good and the revenues are rising and rising there, despite a high tax for sports bets, a lower tax for other products. They've got 15 licenses so far, so one would think a small number, but also France, after 13 years, does not really have a high amount of licensees. And when I look at Germany, I'd say, considering that they only started, it's already quite a substantial number of licensees. To compare Austria and Portugal is, I'd say, especially interesting when you look at the offline market. And here you have very protectionist elements that more or less match, because they also had a tender recently for the casinos. And although there were other bidders, and that brings us back to Austria, it were the old ones that received and got the licenses again granted, and they just invented reasons for that, and they said, well, there was a formal error because a digital signature was not given. And they also said, yeah, you have to prove that you have a terrain to build a casino. And this second bidder had such a terrain. And then the government said, yes, but this terrain is not made for a casino. So you see there are always ways to circumvent and say, no, we don't want another operator in the market. And that pretty much is something you can still do better in the offline area than in the online area, I think.
And we should mention Portugal has the oldest gambling company in Europe, right? More than 500 years.
Santa Casa.
Santa Casa de Misericordia. No?
But this is only a part of the whole Santa Casa construction. And even the European Court of Justice confirmed back in 2009 that indeed the monopoly would be justified in the case of Portugal. And nonetheless, Portugal regulated. So the advantages of an online gambling regulation is so clear, even to those who don't need to, that it's, for me, a little bit a shame that Austria just doesn't proceed. And I think they would highly profit. I think that the monopoly is extremely competitive in Austria. They have a fantastic product, and yeah, they were in the forefront when it comes to sports betting, because in principle sports betting is already licensed since the 70s. And now when it comes to casino, just nothing.
Yeah, just nothing indeed. You mentioned France as well. Of course, a bit a difficult comparison because of the unfortunate situation in France with sports betting being regulated, having licenses available, but not an online casino. And then, of course, for many operators, that just sometimes doesn't make really sense to go all in. Yeah. I'm looking at Zoltan, whether we have a few more minutes, or would you agree? Would you be fine with a bit more Sprechen Sie Deutsch? Then I'm again looking at my colleagues. What I can say about Switzerland as well is by October, November, we should know which applicants are granted a 20-year casino license. So this process is currently ongoing on the federal level. And I'm happy to say that there were more applicants than there are spots available. So there are 23 spots, also actually featuring a very high density of casinos, given a rather small population, about 8 million in Switzerland. So 23, very likely 23 casinos will be there, announced towards the end of this year, and all these casinos can partner. So international B2Bs and international B2Cs, and of course game providers as well, and payment providers, they can all partner with those casinos. Having said that, I'm looking at Christian, whether you want to add briefly something on Austria that we didn't cover.
If you have offerings in Austria, I'm pretty sure there's no need that I brief you on this, especially games of chance, because then you're talking to your lawyer on a regular basis and you should be fine. I think what is really remarkable is this, as the one ruling we talked about today. This is really, for those who want to stay in the Austrian market, this could be a possibility to stay there with one product, with no headaches whatsoever. And yeah, and the tender proceeding, if any one of you has 105 millions lying around and is interested in getting the license, all possible licenses.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Together we'll manage.
Yeah. Maybe if we group one or two of our clients, then we might be in the position to do so. Then I would be, yeah, it would be great if someone finds a possibility to also join this tender, to make it, or to at least give it the appearance of being slightly more objective.
And in sports betting, if you need to know whether now a Curaçao license is enough or whether you need one in Malta. I'm sure Christian will be well in place to advise you on that.
More than happy and prepared.
Jörg, anything you would like to add?
Yeah, something brief on the games permission. In Germany, you get a license to operate and broker your games of chance, and you need a second one for every single game you're going to offer. And this proceeding takes a long time because the law, by mistake, puts an obligation on the regulator to really review every single game, even if it's done 10 times and it's the same game, same release number, he has to look at it. That takes time. There are maybe 5,000 games at stake, but for the time being, it's between 700 or 1,000. Beginning of this week, a new bunch of games is about to be approved by the head of the department and then be sent out to the studios and the suppliers. And they expect by October this year to finally have all these games approved. I keep that short. I think we should always open for some questions if there are any, maybe.
Very good point. Thank you very much to raise it to the moderator. So, but I've been looking in the audience for a while and I haven't seen questions, but of course we have to absolutely ask whether there are any.
It's not for us, just.
Danke.
Thanks for the information. A question about Germany, because before you were referring that you cannot call them casinos, you cannot refer to them casinos, but the shift hasn't happened. People are still looking for casinos. So I know you mentioned enforcement, but what is the expectation of the regulator from the point of view?
That's a big issue. You cannot call it casino games. You cannot use the term casino games or online casino, of course. And Google only looks at the casino games. And the players, they type in casino and Google takes them to the offerings. Probably most of the offerings are non-licensed offerings. And for the regulator, they take this literally. They say it's not allowed, so we do not allow it. How do you optimize your search engine? That's another story, probably. But we had this discussion also with the comparison sites ranking the casinos, because they have to quote the names. And these names are all online casino or whatever it is. Casino is always in there. And here the regulator understands, well, we cannot change it, but it is this disadvantage of licensed operator not to use it. There was one operator called Online Casino Germany, Online Casino Deutschland. It's not allowed to use this brilliant URL for the purpose of offering games of chance, not allowed to use this as a brand, only allowed to keep the name of the company, which was Online Casino Deutschland AG. You can see how stupid that is. The reason why is even simpler. It's because in the arcade gaming space in Germany, the gambling halls with these slot machines where you can put in a few cents, some of them called themselves casinos, and that was something they didn't accept in terms of regulation to distinguish between bricks and mortar casinos, state licensed, the big ones, the real casinos, and those arcade halls. And obviously someone found it a good idea to create the same situation between online casinos, and that's what left for the table games.
Okay, is that good? Thank you very much. We have also another question from the back. Please, Alex. Shoot.
Thank you, Simon. Simon, as you already mentioned, Liechtenstein, I think, I suggest for the future we might be able to also call it Dachel. Then also Austrians, we wouldn't be the smallest ones in the group.
we have done
and also Liechtenstein, as lovely neighbor, would be represented.
Absolutely.
in the panel name.
I think we illustrated today that it's justified. We did officially call it, I believe, a couple of times Dachel. Yeah. Today it's unofficial with a bracket.
Today you can close the Dachli panel later.
Do you have one more thing to add?
Yes. Jörg, actually, you mentioned the deposit limit of 1,000 euros per player per month for Germany, where actually the interstate treaty refers to across all operators. And then I remember legal discussions about this limit file and possible legal issues linked to this limit file. Do you think it will remain now with 1,000 euros per player per month, or can the industry expect this limit file to work, and that we are really talking about across all operators? Because for the operators, this makes a lot of difference. Of course.
That's an excellent question. Thank you for that, Alex. Last year, let's say the interstate treaty says it must be a cross-operator limit, standard limit 1,000 euro per player per month, based on exemptions being granted by the authority and of course granted by the operator. It can be lifted between 10,000 and maximum with extremely sophisticated monitoring of player behavior, 30,000 euros. This should be cross-operator monitored, meaning I, as a player, can deposit 30,000 euros if approved. And if I've done so, cashed in or deposited the first 10,000 with Bet365, second one 10,000 with Tipico, there's only 10,000 left, no matter where I'd like to deposit. Last year it didn't work for legal and we thought for technical reasons, so it was an operator-based limit. So I could spend my 30,000 with every operator twice, 3 times maybe. Now, as of 1st of July, the system works. It's a so-called Lugas server system, but it's challenged, legally challenged, because there is data protection concerns. For some reason, it's legal reason. And the industry was not prepared to be on time. The regulator expected us to be connected and submit the full amounts of deposits on 1st of January. The whole industry thought, well, it's not ready, it doesn't work. So we are all delayed. There is hearing letters circling around. My take is they will stick to the cross-operator deposit limit unless a court is going to suspend it, probably, and this is indeed likely, probably because of these legal reasons. But this can be adjusted. Data protection can be adjusted. It's a matter of discussing things together. That's one of these points. The other things, there is a safe server, also Lugas. The technical guidelines are still missing, so even months after launching the whole system, we are waiting for that, and so far, nobody has to connect to the safe server. And if the guidelines will be published, they say before the summer holidays, then you will have maybe 6 months to do the programming work needed.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for the intervention, Alex. I'm looking around. Anybody else? 1, 2, sold. Thank you very much, and it's a wrap.
Thank you.